and God bringing me back in this little flashback. I could really remember walking along that sidewalk outside of the church and going and remembering thinking, these people just messed up God's will. And it just became so clear for me that God is so big, he takes those things and uses them to accomplish his purposes.
For our new series, the Sea Life Media team took to the roads, visiting some of the most influential places in our pastors' lives, as we get to know their stories in a deeper way. And even more importantly, we get to know the story of a lowly shepherd boy who would one day become King of Israel, the Bible's King David. All of this in search for the secret to living a life truly in line with God's favor, searching for clues to our divine destinies, on a journey to find the secret sauce. Today, for week 3 of Secret Sauce, we're headed southbound on Highway 35, just past Waco, to the small suburb of Hewitt, Texas. While there, Pastor Casey Coates will be helping us as we uncover some of the big moments that shaped our co-pastor Paul McDill and his future ministry and life forever. Paul's going to share his takes on perseverance and leadership, and he's even going to share about a time when he could have given up on the ministry altogether. And from there, we're going to look at the life of King David in Scripture and how his resiliency put him on a path that would put him right in line with God's purpose for his life. So let's hop in the car with Casey and Paul and let's head out to Hewitt, Texas.
So yeah, this is Hewitt, Texas.
All right.
This is not the best part of Hewitt.
This is nice.
This is the older part of Hewitt, for sure. If you go out that way, that's where they built a lot of new homes.
Okay.
This is like the main drag
What
right
is
here.
Hewitt famous for? You know?
I don't think it's really
Not
famous,
famous
for
for
anything.
anything?
No, it doesn't really.
No
have-
claim to fame. No famous people from Hewitt.
Not anything. Not that I know of. Like nothing that I know of
Does it
that
have
I
like a
really
chicken
think of.
farm?
Well, it's got like a M&M Mars. I'm
There
not
you
sure if it's their I don't know if it's their headquarters, but I know they employed a lot
Surely
of
not.
people.
Eminem Mars headquarters
Waco?
in Hewitt, Texas.
It's just outside of Waco, you know. We're like a few
Feel
minutes
right.
from Waco. Used to be a Mazzio's pizza place right here.
Okay.
If you remember Mazzio's pizza.
No, I've never had Mazzio's.
Never had
No,
Mazzio's?
is it good?
You know, I don't think it's probably all that good. I think it's like kind of bad pizza. There's tacos and tequila.
Okay.
Can you beat that? Tacos and tequila
Combination. Randy would love
right
that
there in one
place.
spot. Yeah. So, this is kind of the main strip right here.
All right, here we are for week 3 of our Secret Sauce CG filming, and we find ourselves in Hewitt, Texas, the city that Paul McDill built. Right?
Ooh,
Isn't that what they have written on the
that-
water tower?
That might be an overstatement. It should be on the water tower. I don't think it's made it onto the water tower yet. And
So why are we here, Hewitt, Texas?
I spent 4 years here right after college as a youth pastor, and really great experience. My wife and I had just we've been married for a year, I guess, when I came here, and so had a really great time as a youth pastor here. I think looking back on it, the part of that story that's maybe the most interesting for this series and for what we're talking about here is how I got here. And so that's the part of it that I've looked back on, and really God's taught me so much through just the series of events that led to me being here.
Yeah. So just talking with you a little bit on the car ride here, you felt like this was a season that God used to set you up for a lot of where you're at today.
Yeah, no doubt. So,
Talk to me about that. What was
well,
that
first of all, I mean, it was a great season of ministry here too. So we still have some really close friends that grew up that spent 4 years in that student ministry that are now, now they're in their 40s, walking with Jesus, great families. So we had a really great time of ministry here.
You were how
But
old?
I started here when I was 23,
Yeah, so
23 to 27. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but how I got here, so I was working at a church probably 20 miles away from here, and I was a Baylor student. I was getting close to graduating in the church. The really short version of this story is the church was going through a lot of turmoil. The pastor was going to bring me on. I was a part-time student minister. The pastor wanted to bring me on full-time as kind of an associate pastor. But anyway, there was a lot of turmoil at the church, and they had a Sunday night vote, and I can still remember the Sunday night
For
vote.
your job.
For over my job. Now again, the people were really upset. There was a contingency of people that were really upset with the pastor. So people showed up in mass for that Sunday night business meeting, and so normally Sunday nights were about 60 people. There were about 230, 240 people. These were people that had grown up in this church, were diehard Southern Baptists, felt like they were losing control of the church. So they showed up in mass. It had to pass, according to the bylaws, it had to pass by 75%. It didn't pass because 72% of people voted in favor of it. Looking back on it, there was a lot of crazy stuff, but I was happy. Like, I enjoyed my time there. Like, we left and people were coming up, "Oh, so sorry y'all had to endure this." And we're like, what? We thought it was great. We loved it. We loved the 2 years there. But what was crazy is, so when I resigned, I didn't have another job, just felt like God was done with me there. And I wouldn't have resigned had that passed.
Sure.
And so when I resigned, a friend in the church told me about this job that had just opened up at First Baptist Hewitt, which really the crazy part was that led to some conversations with David Griffin. We started doing youth camp together. He had just started as a youth pastor in the Dallas area. We started doing camp together, which is really what started our relationship. And we had known each other before, but that's really what started our friendship. We started really talking about vision for church. And when we started Sea Life, I can remember one time just having some time with God, praying, and God bringing me back in this little flashback. I could really remember walking along that sidewalk outside of the church and going and remembering thinking, these people just messed up God's will. And it just became so clear for me that God is so big, He takes those things and uses them to accomplish His purposes. And so that's why we're here.
Well, man, what a great story. Love hearing some of those details. I want to go back to that night of the vote where they voted against you taking that position. Was that discouraging to you?
It was. So it wasn't, honestly, it really wasn't personally discouraging. I knew, there was a group of people that were upset with the pastor, and so I didn't take that personally, but it was discouraging because that was kind of our career. That was my career job plan. I mean, I was married. We didn't have any other support. Jill was finishing school, didn't have a job, was, a full-time student at Baylor. It was how we were going to support ourselves. So yeah, certainly it was discouraging.
How'd you deal with that?
I remember I loved the pastor there. He was a godly man, dealing with some heart issues, some stuff, and was super stressed out about it. And I went to him that next day and just told him, I said, "Hey, you go back to the personnel team and tell them that I won't take any more money than what I was making when I was really part-time." And I don't really know why. I felt like I think that was a Holy Spirit thing. I think that was I just felt like God was pressing that in on me. And I didn't know, really, we didn't know where it was going to come from to be able to pay the stuff we had to pay. In fact, there was a lady that died recently from that church that her mother, who was on fixed income, didn't have a lot. I can remember going out one Sunday, it was right after I'd left that church, one Sunday, and I really did not know how we were going to pay our apartment rent. We were about $50 short, and we have family that would have helped us, so that was, we were never thinking we were going to be on the street. I don't want to paint that as more faith than what it really was. But went out to the mail and had a check for $50 from that lady, just a sweet, godly lady.
Sounds like what you're saying is in a time where it felt like God's will had been messed up, that God was giving you some little affirmations along the way that he had your back and was going to take care of you.
And I think that was some of it when we left, that people were saying, man, I'm so sorry you had to go through this. And I can remember Jill and I talking about it, and several times saying to her, I said it to myself a number of times, like, man, I wouldn't have traded this for anything. Yeah. Because God taught us so much in this time, mostly about his faithfulness.
Yeah. You know, I think that's really awesome, a testament to you and your faith and your perspective, that you responded so well, because I think we all know there's a lot of us, myself probably included, that would have taken that vote very personally and allowed it to be tremendously discouraging and possibly be like, man, if this is what ministry is like, then I'm out, you know, and just allowing it to judge you. And,
right.
you know, honestly, that's one of the things, Paul, that you know, for those of you who don't know, Paul's been he was my youth pastor, you're my youth pastor and mentor and friend over the past 24 years of my life or so. And one of the things I've just always admired about you and aspired to is your resiliency. And how I often describe it to others about you is that you're one of the most buoyant people that I know, that the waves come, but you're undeterred. You're just kind of riding them and floating on top of them and staying positive in spirit and hope-filled. Where did that come from? Is that just natural personality? Were your parents like that?
So
Was
I'm
there a
not.
moment?
This isn't a. So my parents were pretty positive people, and still are. I think my mom especially was really. I can remember her just being super like, "Hey, you can do that. Like we can make that happen," you know. So that part is really true. I don't know. I think that's kind of a spiritual gift. I mean, I think that there's a spiritual gift of faith, and I really do genuinely. This is not about some kind of thing that I've done something to deserve some credit for, but I generally think God's going to come through.
That's the word of the week that we're kind of focusing on, and you know, to make the bridge to the story of David that we're looking at,
right.
and the story King David, not David Griffin, obviously. Griffin's none of the things we're talking about in this series.
Doesn't even have hair.
Yeah, exactly. Just joking, David. Love you. Make that connection for us of King. Where do we see resiliency in King David's story?
You know, so I think when you're looking at the life of David and we're drawing some principles out from his life that seem to make his life stand out, and certainly there's the anointing of God. That's the first thing, the favor of God. But why did God anoint David? Why did God put favor on David? And I think part of that is the resiliency that David showed. And when David goes in to fight Goliath, you know, there's a backstory there of his brothers making fun of him, when David says, oh, I could do that, they're saying, no, you can't. You're just a kid. You ought to be out in the sheep, shepherding the sheep. And David's mindset was different than all the rest of the people. He did not let them beat him down into submission. He instead believed wholeheartedly that if God was for him, who could be against him? And he goes into battle. And we see that through the rest of David's life, that when when God's told him he was going to be king, yet King Saul didn't seem to be in favor of that. King Saul wasn't ready to just grant him that position. So King Saul is sending men chasing him. There's a lot of tough, difficult stuff going on in David's life. And yet David bounces back. All the way even to Bathsheba shows some resiliency when he had to face the consequences that came from his sin. And yet David still bounces back and keeps moving forward in faith with God.
Are there any principles that, you know, or pithy statements on resiliency, you know, like summing it up from the story of David, of what you see on ish topic of resiliency?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that I would say that are just statements that sum it up. One is don't quit. You know, that's at the end of the day, that's what resiliency is you just don't quit. You just keep going forward. No matter what happens, you keep moving forward. And I know one of your favorite verses, and I've started to love it too, comes out of Proverbs. It says, though a righteous man falls 7 times, he gets up. You know, he just keeps getting up. When it feels like, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on that is not in our favor at this moment, and I hear people talking about these things like, man, is the budget, are we going to make budget? We lost our job. We don't have this. This isn't working. You know, all our pets' heads are falling off. Those kind of moments, to come back around to this statement that I've just started incorporating in my life more and more is, yeah, but we've still got God.
Yeah.
We've still got God. And I think at the end of the day, that's where David's resiliency comes from, is just a really sharp awareness of that truth, that, man, I've still got God. Yeah. When I don't have the size of Goliath, when I don't have my brother's approval, when I don't even fit in the king's armor, I've still got God. And that's really all I need. And when you really have that deep at the core of who you are, when you're really committed to that truth, it allows you to get back up. It allows you to keep moving forward, because you're going, man, that hurt, that knocked me down, that wave knocked me over, but I've still got God. Yeah. God is still pushing me forward, and God's still going to take care of this. And I think for me, that's been my life experience. That, man, when it feels like this is going not where I wanted it to, God always has come through. Not always the way that I thought he would or always the way that I wanted, but God has always come through.
Communicate to people who are discouraged, down, whatever the case is just stay in your story.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
if you
right.
just stay in your story, you'll see how God will use this chapter and whatnot.
I love it when you're able to look at life and see how it mirrors the truths of Scripture.
Yeah.
The story is not generally everything worked. The story is almost always there was failure, this fell apart, this broke, this didn't work, but they kept moving forward.
Yeah. Resiliency, do you think resiliency is a characteristic that any believer can have and develop?
I think it's a characteristic that every believer ought to and is commanded to have and develop, because it really is about faith in God. It really is about thinking and believing the right things. You know, if your mind is fixed on those truths about that, you know, thinking about things that are good and excellent and praiseworthy, if your mind is fixed on those things, you cannot help but be resilient. Yep. Resiliency is really a byproduct of having a mind that's fixed on the right things.
That's good. That might be it. I feel like we were walking around in the dark and trying to find it. And that, I think that last statement's so good. Well, Paul, thanks so much for taking us back, giving us a window into your history. We've all wondered, how did Paul McDill get so great?
No, you know? I'm sure that has been on a lot of people's minds.
Here a little bit.
The secret is out. The secret sauce.
Yeah.
There we go.
Awesome.
Well, today we heard from Pastor Paul as he discussed a moment in his life when discouragement and disappointment could have meant the end of his ministry. And yet, God had other plans for his life. Have you ever found yourself in a moment like that of true disappointment and discouragement? But now, looking back, you can see how God used it for good. That would be some really encouraging conversation with your group, to talk through moments like that and how you have seen God redeem and use that in your life. Then go ahead and look at that passage in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 28 through 30. You see, David faced all kinds of disappointment and opposition, and yet he maintained an attitude of resiliency. What can we learn from his confidence in God's plan? And how can we apply that same confidence in our own lives? Discuss that with your groups and challenge yourselves to summon the same kind of confidence that David had in your own life. Well, we hope this has been super encouraging for you. As always, there is a link to the discussion guide below. And we'll see you next week as we continue to search for the secrets of the secret sauce. We'll see you then.